simulations and games which have tactical.
That must be them. Oh my God.
The first law the United States ever wrote about computer crime exists because a teenager in a PG-rated movie dialed into the wrong number. And that teenager wasn't even real. A fictional character, played by Matthew Broderick, in a film the Air Force tried to shut down before cameras stopped rolling. WarGames opened on June 3, 1983, and the very next day, the President of the United States watched it at Camp David. 4 days after that screening, Reagan interrupted a national security meeting to summarize the entire plot to a room full of generals and senators. 1 week later, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff came back and told him the real problem dwarfed anything in the movie. 15 months after that, Reagan signed the first cybersecurity directive in American history, and Congress screened clips from the film as evidence in committee hearings. 6 anti-hacking bills followed, and a real hacker ended up in solitary confinement because a federal prosecutor confused the movie with reality. For those of us who grew up with WarGames, it felt like a fun movie about a smart kid and a dumb machine. What none of us understood back then was that behind the scenes, the production itself nearly collapsed. And in front of the screen, the people running the country were taking notes. These are 16 weird facts about WarGames. Welcome back to Just Iconic Rewinds. Let's get into it. Number 1. Before John Badham ever touched WarGames, this belonged to Martin Brest. Brest had poured a year and a half into pre-production, hired the entire cast, and started shooting on August 9, 1982, with a specific vision that ran much darker than what the writers intended. He envisioned something closer to a Cold War conspiracy film than a teen adventure, and he wanted to age David Lightman up to a college student. To get there, he brought in his own writer, Waylon Green, the Oscar-nominated co-writer of The Wild Bunch, and had the original writers, Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parkes, banned from their own script meetings. Their co-producer credit vanished, along with their access. Brest also apparently toyed with an ending where nuclear war actually breaks out. Roughly 12 shooting days in, executive producer Leonard Goldberg screened the dailies and picked up the phone. The actors looked stiff, the tone felt wrong, and Brest lost the job. The future director of Beverly Hills Cop and Scent of a Woman got pulled off a movie about a kid with a modem because the footage wasn't fun enough. Goldberg's call went to John Badham, who at the time sat in the middle of finishing the sound mix on Blue Thunder, while simultaneously negotiating to direct The Princess Bride. Badham watched the dailies, drove home, pulled his car over, found a phone booth, and called Goldberg to tell him he knew exactly what the problem was. The kids weren't having any fun. Signing happened on a Monday, and cameras rolled again by Thursday. One of Badham's first moves involved comparing himself to Victor Fleming inheriting Gone with the Wind, which tells you everything about the confidence level walking through that door. Roughly 10% of the final film still contains Brest's footage, and you can spot it if you know where to look because the frame lines differ from a different photographic process. That scene where David visits his hacker friends, the one with Maury Chaykin and Eddie Deason, belongs to Brest. Same with the payphone scene after David escapes NORAD. Badham rebuilt everything else in 10 weeks.
I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent. It's been a long time.
Number 2. When Badham walked onto that set, Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy were, in his words, stiff as boards. Brest had personally walked both of them through the firing and tried to reassure them their jobs were safe, but the damage had already settled in. Both of them expected to be next. Badham ran 12 to 14 takes of his very first shot, not because anything played wrong in the performance, but purely to wear down the tension until something natural broke through. After that, he arranged a foot race around the soundstage where the loser had to sing to the entire crew. Badham intentionally came in last and belted out The Happy Wanderer, the most ridiculous song he could think of, standing in front of everyone. That broke the wall down. Another move involved telling Broderick to reach up and mess with Dabney Coleman's hair during a scene without giving Coleman any warning, and the reaction captured on screen is completely genuine. Coleman, worth noting, carried the biggest name on set at the time. When the young writers launched into some long analytical speech about his character's motivations, Coleman cut them off and put it simply, No, I understand all that. It's like, am I in a hurry? One group thinks in themes and the other thinks in tempo. What rarely gets mentioned is that Badham also recast several supporting roles after taking over, replacing both the actor playing David's father and the actor playing the general, Barry Corbin as General Beringer. One of the most memorable performances in the entire film came entirely from Badham's casting instincts, not from anything Brest left behind.
3.
Put your hand on the keys,
2,
sir.
1. Launch.
Sir, we are at launch. Turn your key.
Sorry, I am so sorry.
Number 3. Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parks, Yale roommates, wrote the screenplay and had been developing the concept since 1979. Parks carried an Oscar nomination for California Reich, a documentary about the American Nazi Party, which remains a wild biographical detail for one half of the team behind a PG-rated teen hacker movie. Universal passed first, refusing to spend more than $8 million, and Leonard Goldberg dragged the project over to United Artists at MGM, where the studio canceled the production twice before finally approving the budget. Goldberg remembered the core problem clearly, which boiled down to the fact that nobody seemed to understand what they were selling. Executives kept asking if it counted as science fiction. And here's the thing. The writers themselves didn't grasp how the technology worked at first. They had no idea computers could connect over phone lines until Parks' partner Keith Critchlow explained it to them. Lasker later called that the moment everything clicked, because that telephone connection gave their character a way into another world. The real conceptual leap came from Peter Schwartz at the Stanford Research Institute, which happened to be node number 2 of the internet. Schwartz drew the line connecting kid hackers, computer games, and military simulations, and that single conversation turned a character study into a techno-thriller. The Air Force formally opposed the production, warning that it would feed public concern about accidental nuclear war. They offered cooperation in exchange for script changes, but the revisions they demanded would have gutted the entire premise, so the production moved forward without military support. Number 4. Dr. Stephen Falken started as an homage to Stephen Hawking. Lasker had watched a Peter Ustinov-hosted TV documentary featuring Hawking and became fixated on the idea of the world's greatest mind trapped inside a body that couldn't communicate. That tension produced Falken, a genius who gave up on humanity. Casting, though, went in a completely different direction because the writers wanted John Lennon. Communications ran through David Geffen, and Lennon was reportedly interested. Lasker sat at his desk writing Falken's first scene, describing the character's face based on Lennon's photo from the cover of the November 1980 Esquire, when a phone call interrupted everything. A friend telling him Lennon had been shot December 8, 1980. John Wood eventually landed the part, a classically trained British stage actor known mainly for Tom Stoppard plays, bringing a completely different energy. Falken had originally been written for a wheelchair to mirror Hawking more closely, but that detail got dropped. Badham ended up dubbing Wood's voice in the helicopter scene himself because the production audio turned out unusable, and he also provided the voice on the pocket tape recorder heard in the infirmary scene. 2 uncredited voice performances from the director. Number 5. This single conversation validated the entire movie. Willis Ware of the Rand Corporation, a man described as the first person to warn about the dangers of the internet, sat down with the writers during their research phase and told them that NORAD's claim of being completely disconnected from outside networks amounted to, and I'm quoting here, a load of malarkey. Staff routinely left open doors so they could work from home over the weekend. Remote access vulnerabilities, exposed and ignored in 1980. That meeting told Lasker and Parks their premise wasn't science fiction at all, just an open secret nobody wanted to talk about. And that's before you factor in what the actual NORAD commander told them. Number 6. September 15th, 1980, Lasker and Parks showed up at Cheyenne Mountain by piggybacking on a VIP tour of Los Angeles civic leaders, arranged through a lieutenant colonel in Air Force Public Affairs. They went incognito, toured the Crystal Palace Command Center, and were blocked from entering the actual war room. Lasker later admitted the real facility wasn't anywhere near as exciting as the war room they would eventually build for WarGames. At the end of the tour, General James V. Hardinger, Commander-in-Chief of NORAD, walked up and said, "I understand you boys are writing a movie about me. Let's go to the bar." Over drinks, Hardinger described something that became the backbone of the film. The Department of Defense, he explained, kept pushing him to speed things up and get humans out of the loop, but he personally believed in human oversight. That philosophical tension between automation and human judgment became the foundation of General Behringer's character and the entire moral argument of the finished movie. When the writers mentioned needing to get back to their hotel, Hardinger's response landed perfectly. "Young man, I've got 50,000 men at my command. I think I can get you back to the hotel." The Air Force later denied such a conversation ever took place. And this is where the story of WarGames splits in two. Most people remember a movie about a kid who almost starts World War III. What they don't remember, or never knew, is that while this film played in theaters across the country, the actual scenario it depicted unfolded in real life. Twice.
Take us to DEFCON 3. Get on the sack. Tell them to flush the bombers.
Sir.
SAC, this is Crystal Palace. NORAD has declared DEFCON 3.
Number 7. November 9th, 1979. While Lasker and Parks were still developing the screenplay, a technician at NORAD accidentally loaded a wargame training tape into the live early warning network, and screens across the facility lit up showing 1,400 incoming Soviet ICBMs. For 6 minutes, interceptor jets scrambled, missile silos warmed up, and the president's doomsday plane lifted off without the president on board. National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski woke to an emergency call and reportedly stood on the verge of recommending a retaliatory strike before confirmation came through that the alert was false. Lasker turned on the news and heard Walter Cronkite reporting on the incident. Their movie stopped being a thought experiment that night. 7 months later, on June 3, 1980, the same thing happened again. This time, triggered by a faulty 46-cent computer chip that painted 2,200 Phantom missiles across the displays. NORAD responded by spending $16 million on an off-site test facility, built specifically to prevent a third occurrence. The film's opening scene, where 2 missile silo operators get tested without their knowledge, drew directly from these incidents. The difference between the real events and the movie is that in real life, nobody knew it was a test until the window for retaliation had nearly closed.
He wasn't very old.
Well, he was pretty old. He was 41.
Oh, yeah? Oh, that's old.
Number 8. 3 months after WarGames opened in American theaters, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov sat on duty at the Serpukhov 15 bunker outside Moscow when his early warning system reported 5 American ICBMs inbound toward the Soviet Union. Petrov judged the alert as a false alarm caused by sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds and made the decision not to pass the warning up the chain of command. Following protocol would have almost certainly triggered a retaliatory strike from Soviet leadership. Weeks after that, NATO's Able Archer 83 exercise nearly provoked a separate Soviet first strike because the Kremlin believed the exercise served as cover for a genuine attack. The film's core thesis, that the only winning move is not to play, faced a real-world test during its own theatrical run. Historian Michael Warner called this a bizarre cycle of art imitating life imitating art. WarGames imagined a machine learning that lesson, but in reality it took a human being choosing to trust his gut over his instruments.
Wow. We got something.
Number 9. On the evening of June 4th, 1983, one day after WarGames opened, Ronald Reagan watched it at Camp David. Nancy Reagan asked whether something like that could actually happen, and nobody in the room knew the answer. A staffer later recalled that when the general in the film says, "Get me the president," everyone in the screening room turned and looked at the phone sitting next to the coffee table where the president and Mrs. Reagan sat, half expecting it to ring. 4 days later, on June 8th, Reagan entered a White House meeting about MX missiles surrounded by cabinet members and national security advisors. He set down his index cards, asked the room whether anyone had seen the movie, and when nobody had, launched into what witnesses described as a very lengthy and very detailed plot summary. People around the table suppressed smirks, and eyebrows went up across the room. Representative Vic Fazio recalled Reagan saying, "I don't understand these computers very well, but this young man obviously did. He had tied into NORAD." Reagan then turned to General John W. Vesey Jr., chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and asked a single question. Could something like this really happen? Could someone break into our most sensitive computers? Vesey told the president he would look into it and forwarded the question to Donald Latham, Assistant Secretary of Defense and former NSA. 1 week later, Vesey returned with his answer. "Mr. President, the problem is much worse than you think." 15 months after that exchange, on September 17, 1984, Reagan signed National Security Decision Directive 145, the first presidential order in American history, addressing what we now call cybersecurity. The directive noted that computer systems remained highly susceptible to interception and unauthorized electronic access, and that hostile foreign intelligence services had already been exploiting those weaknesses extensively. It placed the director of the NSA in charge as national manager for all government information systems security. That last detail created a problem nobody anticipated. The NSA operated under a legal prohibition against spying on American citizens, and now it oversaw domestic computer networks. The backlash eventually produced the Computer Security Act of 1987, which pulled that authority back from the NSA and handed it to the National Bureau of Standards. A PG-rated movie about a teenager with a modem set off a 4-year chain reaction that restructured how the United States government thinks about electronic security, and the whole thing started because a 72-year-old former actor couldn't stop talking about the plot.
Mr. President, we've got 48 nuclear subs closing on the United States, and we've got 100,000 Soviet troops massing in East Germany, and we're monitoring their bombers that are on alert. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's a load of shit.
No, sir, not you.
Number 10. Representative Dan Glickman of Kansas opened 1983 congressional hearings on computer security by screening 4 minutes of WarGames for the assembled committee members. He told them, "I think this outlines the problem fairly clearly." After showing the scene where David hacks his school's grade system, Glickman added that the sequence proved quite realistic in terms of what real hackers do. A House committee report later declared that WarGames showed a realistic representation of the automatic dialing and access capabilities of the personal computer. 6 anti-hacking bills landed in Congress in 1983 after the film's release, and those efforts directly produced the Counterfeit Access Device and Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1984, the first federal computer crime law, followed by the expanded Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986, which remains the primary federal anti-hacking statute to this day. A movie made law, not influenced law, made it. The committee treated those clips the way a prosecutor would treat surveillance footage, and that kind of thing simply doesn't happen.
No, I can't, okay? Wonder Woman, I can't swim.
Well, what kind of an asshole grows up in Seattle and doesn't even know how to swim?
Number 11. Kevin Mitnick, the most notorious hacker of the 1980s and 90s, directly blamed WarGames for his treatment by the federal government. His quote to Wired laid it out plainly. "That movie had a significant effect on my treatment by the federal government. I was held in solitary confinement for nearly a year because a prosecutor told a judge that if I got near a phone, I could dial up NORAD and launch a nuclear missile." That description matches the plot of the movie, presented in federal court, treated as a credible threat against national security. The New York Times reported in 1994 that Mitnick used a computer and a modem to break into NORAD, and Mitnick called that claim pure fiction, lifted directly from the film's storyline. None of that mattered, because the mythology had already become stronger than the facts. And here's the flip side of that coin. DEF CON, now the largest hacker convention in the world, took its name in 1993 from founder Jeff Moss as a direct nod to the film's prominently featured DEF CON alert levels. The same movie that put hackers in prison also gave them their biggest annual gathering. Number 12. The NORAD set went up at MGM Studios in Culver City and reportedly held the record as the most expensive single set ever constructed at that time, but nobody can agree on the actual price tag. Some sources cite $1 million, while a 1983 promotional featurette claims $4.5 million, and that discrepancy has never been resolved. What we do know is what went into building it. 12 giant screens and 125 monitors filled the space, all running live in camera with zero post-production compositing. The graphics came from Colin Cantwell, and this is where the story takes a turn. Cantwell designed the original X-Wing fighter, the TIE Fighter, the Star Destroyer, and the Death Star concepts for Star Wars, suggested the iconic opening sequence of 2001, A Space Odyssey to Stanley Kubrick, and sat in the CBS studio with Walter Cronkite during the Apollo 11 moon landing. That's the person they hired to build fake computer screens for a movie about a teenager with a modem. Cantwell ran 4 HP 9845C desktop computers, each weighing about 100 pounds and carrying a price tag near $90,000. Basic programs written through his firm Crystal Chip drove monochrome vector displays, and each frame got still filmed one at a time through successive red, green, and blue color filters using Mitchell 35mm cameras. Producing a single frame took roughly 1 minute. Over 10 months, his team generated 50,000 feet of computer graphics negative and printed nearly 130,000 feet of film for the process projectors, with the operation running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 7 straight months. The screen material itself earned a Technical Achievement honor from the Academy. Number 13. The WOPR drew its visual design from 1940s military tabulating machines and came together at Yahtzee Local 44 in Culver City. Built from plywood painted with metal finish paint, Badham joked that General Beringer could have thrown the thing a fair distance. Stereo equalizer displays provided the blinking lights, and the countdown timer used a prototype flat-panel LCD screen, genuinely cutting edge for 1983, designed by a man named Lowell Nobel. Badham also coined the name WOPR because the military's actual term, SIOP, struck him as too boring, and he preferred the Burger King Whopper connection. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about. Visual effects supervisor Michael L. Fink physically sat inside the WOPR prop during filming, operating a hidden Apple II computer that drove the countdown display while following Badham's real-time instructions from outside the shell. A man inside the Doomsday Machine running it on an Apple II while the cameras rolled. After production wrapped, the prop got broken up for scrap, and the only replica appeared decades later for a 2006 AT&T commercial. David's home computer, on the other hand, used real hardware, an MSI 8080 from 1976 paired with an MSI keyboard, a 17-inch Electro-Home monitor, and a Sermatech 212A modem. The acoustic coupler visible on screen served purely as a visual prop because the modem didn't actually need one, but it looked better on camera. Rigged keystrokes triggered specific output from a hidden CompuPro system positioned off-screen, and the original hardware eventually ended up in the hands of a collector named Klaus Kaiser.
Tell me this is one of your simulations, Mr. McKittrick. All right.
Number 14. Most retellings of the WarGames legacy claim the film inspired the 414s, a group of teenagers from Milwaukee who broke into systems at the Los Alamos National Laboratory and the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. The narrative runs clean. Kids saw the movie, kids imitated the movie. Congress panicked. That timeline falls apart under scrutiny. The 414s had already been hacking since spring 1983, well before the June 3rd release, and they accessed Sloan Kettering's system on the same day the film opened in theaters. Pure coincidence? They weren't imitating anything from the screen because they had been doing the exact same thing the film depicted at the same time, completely independently. The media didn't care about that distinction. Reporters dubbed it the WarGames case, and Newsweek put 414-member Neil Patrick on its September 5, 1983 cover in what reportedly marked the first time the word hacker appeared as a headline in mainstream American media. WarGames didn't create the problem, it named it. BBS operators noticed unusual rises in modem activity throughout 1984, attributed directly to the film introducing a mainstream audience to what modems actually did. By 1985, at least one company advertised a WarGames autodialer for Commodore computers and the Hacker Magazine 2600. The Hacker Quarterly launched in 1984, the year after the film. Number 15. The scene where the Jeep crashes into the NORAD gate played out nothing like the script intended, because the vehicle was supposed to drive through cleanly, but instead hit the barrier and flipped over in a genuine accident. Badham improvised immediately, shooting the characters climbing out of the overturned Jeep and sprinting down the tunnel on foot, which turned a botched stunt into what feels like a deliberate escalation of tension. That sequence stands as one of the more energetic moments in the final act, and it only exists because something went wrong on the day. Worth noting, the notification sound used for the NORAD tour group in the film is actually a repurposed Galaga arcade sound effect, a little audio Easter egg buried deep in the mix. When David comes home from school, background TV audio mentions a fire at a prophylactic recycling factory, a deliberately planted adult joke tucked inside a PG-rated movie released in 1983, one full year before the PG-13 rating even existed. A continuity error also slipped through with the launch code, because CPE 1704TKS briefly appears earlier in the film as JPE 1704TKS, and nobody on the production caught it. And here's one for the collectors. When WarGames first aired on television, the countdown scene carried additional music that started when General Beringer says, "Sir, at this time, we cannot positively confirm the inbounds." That music disappeared from every subsequent TV airing and home video release, and it survives today only in foreign language dubbed versions. If you've ever felt like that scene played differently when you first caught it on broadcast television, you weren't imagining it.
General, you are listening to a machine. Do the world a favor and don't act like one.
Number 16. One more detail that ties everything together. An early draft of the script included a weapon called Uncle Ollie, Ollie standing for Omnipresent Laser Interceptor, a space-based defensive laser system controlled by artificial intelligence. The writers cut it for feeling too speculative. And then in March 1983, 3 months before the film opened, Ronald Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, a space-based defensive system. The writers had predicted Star Wars before Star Wars existed. What matters more than that Easter egg, though, is the bigger picture. WarGames arrived a full year before The Terminator, making it the first mainstream American film to raise the question that now dominates the conversation around artificial intelligence. What happens when an autonomous system cannot tell the difference between a simulation and reality? Joshua doesn't want to destroy the world because Joshua doesn't have wants. It carries a function and executes that function without grasping the consequences. Teaching it futility through tic-tac-toe amounts to a primitive version of what AI to artificial intelligence researchers now call alignment, getting a system to arrive at human values through its own processing rather than through rules imposed from outside. Google co-founder Sergey Brin described WarGames as a key movie of a generation, especially for those of us who got into computing. Congressional hearings on AI-era artificial intelligence safety in 2023 circled around the same themes the film had laid out 4 decades earlier. The final numbers landed at $124 million worldwide against a $12 million budget, with 3 Academy Award nominations and a 5th-place finish at the 1983 domestic box office behind Return of the Jedi, Terms of Endearment, Flashdance, and Trading Places. Roger Ebert gave it a perfect 4 out of 4 stars. None of that is what survived. What survived is the question, the one Reagan asked, the one Petrov answered, the one still hanging in the air every time a system makes a decision faster than any human being can review it. WarGames told us the only winning move is not to play. 40 years later, we still haven't figured out how to stop playing. If you like movies that accidentally rewrote government policy, subscribe for more weird facts about classic films every week. This was Just Iconic Rewinds. See you tomorrow.